here, right now, right here, right now, right here, right now, right here.
Hello and welcome to another Christo Putting the World Right. After a short break because of various health problems I've had, and so how appropriate that I'm joined by a doctor. It is the GP and broadcaster and very, very popular contributor to various news channels. It's Dr Renee Hoenderkamp. Hello, Dr Renee.
Hello, reunited at last.
We are reunited because, of course, we did many shows together on Talk over many years, actually, and we didn't always agree, but I always feel like we gave each other a very fair hearing, and
So,
and I think that's really important. I think that that's what's being lost nowadays because we don't all need to agree, but we all need to hear each other out and give each other a fair hearing and sometimes say, well, you know what, we'll agree to disagree, or you know what, I've changed my mind a little bit because of what you've said, which, I mean, you feel that quite strongly, don't you, that that's being lost nowadays, right?
I think it is being lost. And you know what, as fixated as you might be in your views, there should always be that element that is open to be persuaded another way. It just happened to me recently on the death penalty. And I never thought I'd change my mind on that, but I did. And so, you know, that you should always be open to other ideas and to think about things.
Well, you did it very famously with me. Well, I say very famously, I've referenced it before on the show, because I remember we were arguing once about, I think, well, you correct me if I'm wrong, but one of Alice's teachers, you've got a 5 or 6 year old daughter, is she? How old is she?
6 now.
6. And one of the teachers, she asked about his relationship, and he said, "Oh, I'm gay. I'm you know, married to someone, to a guy," and you didn't think it was appropriate. But I said to you, well, no, well, it is if it's based on love and it's just simply informing her, well, actually, I'm just married to a guy, and not trying to push something, not trying to tell her whether it's right or wrong, not trying to tell her that she might be a lesbian at age 6, because that's ridiculous. And when I put it to you like that, I remember with great humility, you came to me like the next week and said, you know what, I've thought about it and I think you're right. You've changed my view a little bit if it's in that context. That was more or less what happened. Is that right?
It was kind of what happened, but the difference was these children didn't ask.
Okay.
At the school involved, the head teacher stood up and made an announcement to 4 and 5 year olds in assembly. That's what I thought was wrong. But yes, I think, and I've had this conversation with Alice's headmaster, because she's at a school that was a Catholic school. It's not Catholic anymore, but it's still the same staff and the same kind of ethos. And he says the same thing. He says, look, if children ask us questions, we have to answer them, because not answering them actually just creates more confusion, and they will find out for themselves somehow. So yes, I think you're right. And in the way that you said it, of course, because I have lots of friends, as you know, who are gay. And
well, you're loved by the gays. You're a gay icon.
No. And so, you know, she sees lots of my male friends who are with their partners, you know. So yes, I get that. But you're absolutely right. As long as it's not pushed as an ideology and they're not being taught about it.
And also that it's based on love, the fact that there are different kinds of loving relationships. I mean, I've seen horror stories of, okay, let's go into the ins and outs of it all. That's not appropriate. And also I agree that if it's right children, we're making an announcement, your teacher's gay, that doesn't make sense to me. But if it's in the context of it coming up in conversation or in questions. So yeah, that's a great example of us having a conversation, and you've made me think differently about things as well, which I think is just really important. I used to love doing late night radio, actually, because quite often I'd come on with one point of view, and the public are the best educators that you could possibly have. You'd hear points of view that you would never have in a million years thought about. And actually, I've got questions for you, Dr. Renee. You know that? Because I put it out, you saw the tweet, I put it out on Twitter that I was going to talk to you. And this brings me nicely to a question. I might pepper these in throughout our conversation. But Mark asks, and I've never asked you this. Was it Mark who asked this one? Yes. Have you ever encountered any patients that have heard you broadcasting or that have heard your political views and have wanted to challenge you on them? Have you ever got in trouble because of it?
Okay, so there's several answers to this. In the main, no. And I'm very careful, obviously, when I'm seeing patients, I'm seeing them as a doctor, I'm in a position of trust. I'm not there to impart my political views. So unless I know a patient really, really well and it's a conversation we can have, it's something that we don't touch on. Having said that, during COVID, I had a patient write to the surgery to say that she no longer felt safe in my care because I queried some of the COVID policy. And that's fine. We've got other doctors at the practice. If you don't feel safe in my care, see one of the other doctors. I've had a complaint to NHS England that meant I had to go to panel, which was quite painful because of my views on Dylan Mulvaney as a transgender woman.
Okay. And because that does actually take us nicely into the trans debate, because of course you're very passionate about women's spaces being kept for biological women and for other aspects of that debate. The aspect of the debate where essentially there are conflicts of rights or perceived conflicts of rights. And but of course it's a big healthcare subject. So on the one hand, people would say, well, look, you're the perfect person to discuss it because it's about healthcare. But then on the other hand, if you are going against the narrative, or if one of your patients wants healthcare around being trans, that does create conflict for you, right?
So I'm going to answer that, and I can do this because enough time has passed. Yes, it creates conflict in me, but I think a good practitioner should be able to put that conflict aside. And I have held the hand of a teenager man all the way through to the other side of full sex reassignment surgery. And it gave me sleepless nights. I'm not going to pretend to you that I did that quite happily and skipped them there. And I tried where I could to have conversations to make sure it was the right thing for them, but they made it very clear that it was what they wanted to do, so I supported them through to that surgery. Do I think it's right? No. Internally, I think it's morally and ethically wrong, but as a practitioner, I have to be able to park my personal views and do what's right for the patient.
Why do you think if they're an adult, it's morally and ethically wrong? I understand the debate around children and the contentiousness around children and at what age a child, if any, can consent to any kind of trans-based medical care, and I think that there are real debates to be had about that. But why, as an adult, do you have grave concerns about an adult doing that?
So firstly, I would argue that an adult is not 19. I know they are legally in law, but the evidence is very, very clear in science that a child's brain is not fully developed, especially a man, until they're 25. They're still forming connections and neurons and everything else. So at 19, they're a long way from being fully developed in terms of their brain. Secondly, they started that journey when they were a child. And the moment that you're a child and you have hormones pumped into you, you're on that train. So I don't think you should put a child on that train, because the evidence does show that once you're on that train, 95% of you are going to go through to the end. So I just think it's too early. I think come 25, Krista, you're absolutely right. At 25, if that's the decision you want to make, then that's the decision you make. Should the NHS do it? No, absolutely not.
What should the NHS provide for someone who has gender dysphoria, in your view?
Therapy.
And what if the therapy comes to the conclusion that actually that patient would be better served by going through gender reassignment surgery? Because I know you're skeptical of it, and I respect your skepticism, but also you also are in agreement, I know you are, that there are thousands of examples of people who have had gender reassignment surgery who have gone on to be happier in their lives. I know there are examples of some that haven't, but there are many examples of those that have. So for some people, whether you are in favour of it or not, it has been the right thing. So are there cases where you do think, well, actually, it's the least worst option, it's the right thing for them, and if their therapy, an extensive amount of therapy means that it is the right thing for them, well, then the NHS should provide it?
No.
Why?
Because I don't think that actually exists really in proper therapy. Lots of people stay in therapy for life, as you know. I mean, we could have a whole debate about that, because they don't come to the conclusion of what they're trying to work through. All of the good, decent evidence shows that actually the suicide levels in these people is worse after transition. It's not solving their problems. I looked at a study recently, actually, and it showed that actually their suicide rate goes up, or their suicidation thoughts of goes up after transition. And the reason for that, Christo, is they don't get a man doesn't get a functioning female body. A man gets a body that's non-functioning, painful, repeated surgeries are often needed. They can't utilise their faux vagina in the way that they dreamed they would be able to. And so it goes on without going into really gory details, because it is gory and it is horrible. And it's a lifetime of medicalisation.
But what about for those people it does work for? What about for those people that it does?
There's not many of those, Christo. And if it does, fine, they should pay for it.
But they would argue that they have the right to that level of healthcare, in as much as, you know, there are many areas that could be perceived to be a choice in your life that you still get healthcare for. You might choose to smoke and then get the healthcare around the damage that smoking does to you. You know, I've struggled with my weight, and the NHS, I have the right, if I got to the point where my health was really bad as a result of my weight, where the NHS would step in. So there are examples, there are precedent set of people whom have had areas of their life that are perceived choices, but the NHS steps in. Even sexuality. I mean, there are areas of life around being gay that straight people don't encounter, and they get different nuanced healthcare needs I don't need to tell you about any of these healthcare needs. I mean, this is your job. So why would the trans thing be different to those examples I've cited?
Okay, so this is we could really unpick this, and it's very deep and complex. Number one, smokers were told by doctors smoking in their surgeries that smoking was good for them, and they were actively encouraged by the big companies to smoke. That's the first thing. So the people now who are in their 60s and 70s and getting lung cancer were encouraged to do so by the medical fraternity, arm in arm with big tobacco. Secondly, smokers pay much more in tax than they take out of the NHS. That's a proven fact now. I'm not condoning smoking. I'm really not. But that's a fact. And the same can be said of HIV. It's much cheaper to stop someone getting HIV by giving them a very cheap pill than it is to actually treat them for the rest of their lives with expensive HIV drugs. And so these are just calculations that the NHS has done on obesity, on cost of obesity versus cost of treating it before it happens. That doesn't happen with sex reassignment. In fact, quite the contrary. These people become a very expensive patient for the NHS, and they're not very happy, as the research shows. And they have multiple medical problems, most of them.
But a lot of people would say, well, look, there's research to say, and I don't think either of us have got research at our fingertips, but you know that someone watching this who is transitioning or has transitioned or is very behind trans rights would say, well, look, there are many examples of people whose lives have been changed so much for the better for having this sort of surgery, or not even going for the surgery, just redefining themselves in their biological body.
That's fine. That's up to them. They can redefine themselves as they want. That's none of my business, Christo. But it is my business when taxpayer money, of whom I am one, is paying for surgery which isn't actually medical healthcare and isn't, by the really good data, and I've got lots of it, actually being improved. But also, let's argue that I really, really, really wanted to have bigger boobs than God gave me. Really did, my whole life. Should the NHS pay for that? Because
well, they do. If you went and had, I know someone who gets Botox on the NHS because they were so distressed that they were looking old. If you can get someone,
absolute nonsense.
I do. I genuinely know someone whose doctor signed them off to get there. If you can prove, if I can prove that my nose, for instance, was causing me such distress that I can't leave the house.
I'm sorry, I'm not having this. I'm the one who does the referrals every day. The people that get Botox on the NHS, and there are plenty, newborn babies get Botox. People that have got contractures get Botox. People that have got problems with their sphincters get Botox. People that have got a sweating problem that means they can't actually hold a pen get Botox. They don't get it because they've got wrinkles.
Okay, well, then what about other examples then? What about things like, if, again, like I said, if you have such dysphoria about a feature like your nose or and it is actually creating a mental health problem, there are examples of
They
when
used
the NHS will refer you. Now, it might take forever, it might take a long time, but you will be given that surgery because of the mental health problem it gives you on the NHS.
Not anymore. There used to be, and that has stopped. Okay, but listen, I don't. My issue here comes from that if the NHS did have that magic money tree, we should do all of these things, not necessarily sex reassignment because I think it's harming people, but we should do lots of things that ideally are not medical problems. So let me give you an example, and we've talked about this before. I don't believe, and this will have people shouting at me, that we should do IVF for anyone on the NHS unless they're a cancer patient, because cancer has caused their infertility. And some of these people are really young. They're teenagers with leukemia, for example. So I don't think we should. I think in an ideal world we should, because as you know, I think people should have more children. But I don't think the NHS can afford to take these luxury decisions. These are luxury decisions. We are not in a place where we can take luxury decisions. So we need to redefine what we treat. And I would cut lots of things, not just sex reassignment. I would cut lots, and I would bring the NHS back to treating medical conditions that are threatening your health.
What if your lack of fertility, you mentioned cancer being a medical condition that might create the lack of fertility. What if it was a different medical condition? I sort of see your argument. If it's someone that has just simply left it late to maybe have a child, that it was then a decision not to get pregnant earlier. I can see the logic of that. But if you have a different kind of medical condition that means that you can't have children as easily, surely that's what the NHS is there for, which is solving a medical problem which would not be there otherwise. They would be able to get pregnant otherwise. So that would be an example
You
where
can't
IVF.
guarantee any woman might be able to get pregnant just because she's got a uterus and ovaries. We have lots of women who just cannot get pregnant even when they're 28 because for some reason their body just doesn't want to do it. In an ideal world, it's a luxury decision, we would do it. The answer is no. You can buy IVF just as you can buy sex reassignment or varicose vein or nose surgery or bigger boobs or hair transplants. You can buy all of those things.
But I think that then, because I disagree with you, and you know I adore you, but I disagree with you on some aspects. I agree with you on some aspects of the trans debate, i.e. areas of conflicts of rights that need debate and looking into. I completely see your point of view on that, but I don't have a problem with someone who has been through the appropriate steps that wants to have gender reassignment surgery, because also gender dysphoria, and you may disagree with this, is a medically diagnosed issue. So I don't have so much of a problem with that whatsoever. Where I think that there needs to be debate is these potential conflicts of rights. But you probably go a bit further as well, because you, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, so I don't want to put words into your mouth, but you are sort of, you wouldn't, or would you refer to someone in their preferred pronouns? What do you think of pronouns? Where are you with pronouns? What are your pronouns, Renee?
I'm kind of conflicted on this because you know what? If it was someone who was respectful to me and I was in a conversation, you know, why wouldn't I? But on the other side of that coin, the problem with doing that is if you persist with pronouns, you reach the bizarre point where you say she raped her with her penis.
Yeah, so I don't believe, I think if you have, I believe in being respectful towards people's pronouns. I do think there needs to be you need to cut people some slack as well. I mean, if you get someone's pronouns wrong and you're well-intentioned, I think there's some of the hysteria that seems to come from that is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But I think that if you are someone who identifies with a different pronoun to the one that would be assumed to be for your biological sex, and then you go on to commit a sexual crime, you lose the right for those pronouns. That pronoun right is taken away from you. And Ricky Gervais does a great skit about this, actually, and about how you know that people are more worried about the pronouns and the fact that someone has actually been raped. And so I think that there's respect and there's intent that needs to be thought about. But also, I would say that on both sides, I think there needs to be respect and intent from those perhaps more cynical people, because it's just kind. You know, I might say one day that I think I'm identifying as feeling really thin. I don't think that you would say to me, well, actually, factually, Christo, you're still overweight. You'd say, God, yeah, you might think it, but you would say, God, yeah, I think you're looking really good.
Interesting point, isn't it? Because let's say a teenager came to me who was painfully thin and said, I'm fat, doctor. Would I say to that teenager, do you know, you are a bit chubby, let me give you some fat pills?
No, I think that that's where intent comes in, though. I think that's why I think it's both intent and kindness, because if your intent is that I want to help this person, then great. But if it's someone that you don't know very well that wants you to use different pronouns, why is it your place to help them be educated that perhaps biologically there's a difference?
Standing that then, why am I as a healthcare professional expected, when the same teenager comes to me and says I'm in the wrong body, doctor, am I expected to say, oh, okay, I think you are. Shall I help you achieve that?
No, I think it's your job as a healthcare professional to say, well, look, okay, what are the tools that we can employ to ensure that this is the right thing for you? And that's why I have an issue with the definition, I think, of what's being called, what did it used to be called? You know, when you have conversion therapy, that I think that if you are what was gay conversion therapy, i.e. trying to convince gay people that they weren't gay, well, there was no physical aspect to becoming gay. So therefore, whereas I do think that there should be a higher level of discussion, therapy, and all those things for someone who's actually going to physically change their body. So I've never really bought the comparison between what you would call gay conversion therapy and trans conversion therapy, because I think that there is more that needs to be debated if you're someone who is identifying and wanting to change your body permanently.
And actually, that's an interesting point, because at the moment, the trans lobby are trying to convince the government that when they put through their gay conversion laws, that actually includes trans. And that would be a disaster for a healthcare professional, because we would not be able to have those
Yeah, and I think that if you're going to change your body forever, you need to make sure that it's right. And those people around you who are your carers need to make sure that it's right for you. That's their obligation. And again, it's about intent. If the intent is kindness, if the intent is to help, then that's exactly what healthcare professionals, I think, should absolutely be doing. So I think there's the kindness on the side of the people that need to use the right pronouns, but also that kindness extends from the other side. And if you hear a pronoun that you are unhappy with, that you are addressed by, well, please don't get hysterical about it. Please don't do sort of these trolling videos about it where you're trying to shame people, because if people's intent is good and they make a mistake, well, their intent is good and they make a mistake. It's what happens.
Do you not think we're moving into newspeak world now, though, where you tell me what I must say and how I must address people and what I must think? I must think you're a woman, therefore I must call you a woman, and I must do this.
No, I think that's what I don't like is must. But I think to ask is okay. I think to must is different. I always cite this example, and you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong, but I always cite the example of we've spoken about this before, I'm pretty sure, the train, on the LNER train, where it was going up to whatever destination, and they get on the train and the train announcer comes on and says, ladies and gentlemen, this is your direct train to Leeds and the buffet car is here, and I hope you all have a lovely journey and thank you very much indeed. And a couple of non-binary passengers tweeted to say, well, this announcement clearly wasn't for me because it was ladies and gentlemen, and it means nothing to me. It wasn't for me. And LNER replied saying, yes, we're going to take that manager aside. And that manager was being lovely and addressing people. That to me was moronic, because you know that the manager meant you as well. It's just that he didn't say hello everyone, hello to people who identify as ladies, gentlemen, or anything else. You're not stupid. You know that announcement also meant you. So I think it needs to be on both sides that there is a little bit of slack that is cut.
Yeah, I mean,
because that's ridiculous, right? That was ridiculous, right?
That's ridiculous. Yes, it's ridiculous. And it's also, I do worry that all of this is, and many other things that we're doing like this, is denigrating what these people would call heteronormativity. And if we continue to denigrate heteronormativity, sorry, Christo, and we have Cambridge University students, 52% of them saying they're not heterosexual, the world is going to run out of people.
Yeah, well, then also I would, well, firstly, as someone who is as gay as Christmas, I've never wanted that to be at the expense of straight people feeling bad. Yeah, there is something that has changed about the debates around equality in recent years, I think, that has been not about people who are different having equal rights, but about people who are different making those people who are not feel terrible about themselves. And I'm not into that. I don't want straight people to feel terrible. I don't want you to think you've got some sort of straight privilege, if we use language that others have had. I don't want that. That doesn't serve me, and it also doesn't help you to feel better about my existence. It just probably makes you get a bit annoyed.
Where it goes, I think, and this worries me a lot, I think a lot about this lately, is we are denigrating the family unit now. We are making women feel that their role as a mother and a homemaker in support of a family unit is worthless. And they must go out to work and they must have that career because that's the respectable thing to do. Then they get into 38 and suddenly they can't have kids. And we've got a massive problem with this around.
You take away their IVF.
Yeah.
You would.
But they can pay for it because they waited.
Well, I suppose they've got these amazing careers that they've had till they're 38. They can afford it.
And I tell you what, I did my obs and gynae job in Chelsea and Westminster, where it's full of bankers and bankers' wives. And the average age of the first-time mother in Chelsea and Westminster, lots of twins, is 37. That's the average. So, extrapolate that. But I think we need to get back to the point where we tell women that actually being a mother and a supporter of her partner who goes out to work and makes the money so that she can stay home to be a mother is actually one of the most valuable jobs in society that you could ever do. And it's rewarding, but it's not rewarding if you're thinking, shit, this is so boring. I should be at work. I should be forging my career. What am I doing here with this person who doesn't speak to me, who needs their bum wiped and their nappy changed all day long? I really, really worry that all of this getting rid of, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs., being a mother isn't valuable, is destroying the family unit and our population control.
Well, you made me think differently about something once, and that was when they were talking about making childcare cheaper and tax deductible and all of these sorts of things. And you made a point that has never left me, and I now make this point when I'm asked about this. I've stolen it from you. And that is, fine, you can give contributions towards childcare so that parents can work. That's great, but also you should give that contribution to the parent who's staying at home if they choose to be the parent that raises at home and choose to be that kind of child carer rather than giving it to a babysitter. And I actually think that's a marvelous idea because, and I think it's brilliant women have choices. Amazing that women have more choices and that men have choices. But I think where it's gone slightly wrong is that one of the choices being I want to stay at home and be a mum has somehow become a bit shameful. And that should be as equally a good choice. But that ties into all the other issues we have with society, because it used to be years ago that a mum or a dad could do that, and one income would give them enough money for housing, would give them enough money to have a stable life, would give them enough money to buy a house, to pay a decent, reasonable rent, to do all of those sorts of things. But we don't live in a society like that anymore because rents are through the roof, housing is through the roof, the cost of living is higher than it's ever been. So a lot of people, I have a lot of female friends who would love to have stayed home and been once they started having babies, but they knew they had to go back to work and they knew they couldn't have more than one or two children because of the cost of life.
So I come at this having done it both ways. I come at it having had Callum when I was 21. His father, Mickey, who was a brilliant dad, wasn't working. I went back to work full time in media, which was 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. when he was 28 days old.
Wow.
I had to pay the mortgage. Then when Alice was born and I was in a much more privileged position in life and obviously much older and lucky to have a baby at that age, I was able to build my work around her. So she didn't even need to go to nursery until she was 3. And I only did that so that she got some socialization. And I'm there. I've picked her up from school today. I told you I had to just sort out the
Yeah.
child malarkey before we did time. I've picked her up from school. I've delivered her to Granny. Now, there's the other thing, Christo. We've broken up the extended family. So lots of women don't have the opportunity that I have with a mum who can look after her when I'm not looking after her. And, you know, we've lost so much in this. We've lost the social input of generations saying, oh, don't worry, take some lemon and water, your throat will be fine. You know, this is how you feed baby. All of those nuggets that come from mixing children and generations, we're losing the value of.
But
And
that's also because you can't afford to live near your mum and dad anymore because of the fact that, you know, a lot of the generations that are having babies now, their parents were the baby boomers who probably have ended up in really affluent areas now, which by some sort of accident, and I don't resent any of them for doing so, because it's a failure of government. It's a failure of government, I think, because you like it or loathe it, with too many people for the infrastructure we have in this country. That's just a fact. But the infrastructure, now it could be that you say the infrastructure hasn't caught up and we should have this many people. You could say that we should have fewer people and the same infrastructure. Wherever you come from with it, it is a fact. We do not have the infrastructure for the people. So that's part one of it. And that has then obviously caused costs, prices, demand to absolutely soar.
yeah, and I totally agree with that. I'm not going to argue with any of that. But do you not think another part of it is the me entitled society, where everything revolves around me? Nobody can have a moment of discomfort in their lives. So when Callum was, when was it? 89. So he was a baby. And I'd mortgaged myself to the hilt to move into a nice area. Mortgage rates went up to 15%. And I nearly died, Christo. So all I could afford to do was pay his nursery fees, pay the au pair and pay the mortgage. I lived on yoghurt and apples for a year. But that's fine. I got through it. I'm still alive. I kept the roof over our heads. And I didn't even tell my mum. I've told my mum now. And she says, I wish you'd said something to me. I would have helped you. But it was because I had that control within me. I had to do it. We now export that. I tweeted about it today. We've now got an external locus of control where it's down to everybody else to help us. And we must always have our luxuries in life. Otherwise, life isn't worth having.
I've been incredibly lucky. I would be hypocritical if I said I haven't been incredibly lucky, because I come from a family where, and I believe this passionately, so one of my earliest memories is my mum and dad sharing a meal. They were dirt poor. Dirt poor.
Yeah.
But my dad then started his business in the Thatcher years. They did well, not millionaires or anything, but really comfortable. And then their philosophy was, right, as soon as we don't want our children to go through what we did. So they helped me with a deposit. They helped my brother with a deposit. You know, I believe if you actually are a parent that has wealth tied up in their house as a result of the issues with the state, it is your duty, actually, if you can afford it, to help your children get on the ladder. Why would you want your children to suffer in a way that you didn't? I don't think children should be spoiled. I don't think they should be, but I believe that in that help passionately. And I'm very lucky that I had that. That doesn't mean that it's been easy, and that doesn't mean I haven't had to make sacrifices in order to better myself. The way I also did that was to sort of then mortgage myself to the hilt and buy other properties and become a bit of a speculator, and took massive risks by doing that, because I did all of that on my own. So, you know, I'd had the help from my parents. That was it. That was the help. And I did with it what I could to get myself where I am. But I've worked every weekend for as long as I can remember. I've not gone down a mine. I've worked overnight. I've worked the longest hours going. I have not gone out to parties and to nights out with friends for as long as I can remember, because I was doing those sorts of hours because you have to, because I had money to pay. I had mortgages to pay. I had things to do. So I agree with you. And where I agree that there is an issue is, I think, this idea that we are trying to legislate out adversity into people's lives, when it's adversity that actually gives you the character and the strength to overcome issues. And in that, and you and I have spoken about this before as well, this coddling of people, where, you know, there are signs up everywhere that you're going to die. The state needs to take over and keep you safe. You mustn't cross the road. You mustn't do this. You mustn't do that. You mustn't think for yourself. And on that, I think we are heading for a real fall because people don't think for themselves or have any initiative or have any resilience.
No. So I've written about this on GB News website this week, actually, where the headline is, you can look it up. Why are Gen Zers like they are? We have to blame ourselves. For all of those reasons that you've just said. Mary Harrington, the philosopher, writes very nicely about this. She says that there is what's called now the devouring mother. Now, I thought that was a mother, you know, the helicopter mum. But in her worldview, it isn't the mother. It is institutionalized childcare from a very young age all the way through. Because she says by the very nature of it, if you're looking after other people's children, you can't let them take any risks because something bad might happen. So when little Johnny wants to walk on a wall, the institutionalized nursery can't let him, whereas mum, looking after him, would. And she might walk alongside him to make sure if he falls.
She'll catch him, but he'll still learn to walk on the wall. That's really interesting.
Yeah, but she says, but childcare can't do that. And the more we push babies into childcare now, we're now paying for it from 9 months old, the less risk they will be exposed to and the worse they will be as adults.
But it's also, I think, the state is obsessed with keeping us safe, and it went mad during COVID, and it's this idea that I've tripped over here. It's someone's fault. No one warned me about that bit of pavement that was a little bit uneven. Well, something should have warned you, and that was your eyes. Not everything is someone else's fault. But no, I've got to legislate against it. And then what will happen is that pavement will be replaced, and then probably there'll be a sign up next to that bit of pavement saying, take care on this pavement. Whereas I think before someone would have said, well, look, you've hurt yourself on the pavement. Make sure you don't do it again. I always cite this example, and I showed it on telly the other day, of the escalators where there are 18 ways that I might hurt myself on that escalator. And it's like ridiculous things like don't carry your luggage, don't take your dog, don't and it's like every time someone hurts themselves, they think of another way that they could put another thing on it. Like, don't tap dance, don't wear a long skirt, don't stick your fingers in. And it's like, oh my word.
Every time I go to the loo in my GP surgery, there is a sign on the wall that has 9 pictures of ways that you can collect your poo for a stool test. And I sit there looking at it. One of them said,
I saw that the other day. There's a cling film way. There's is one of them the fruit the thing you get grapes in.
Yeah, and the cling film one says, don't forget to make a dip.
Make a dip.
I look at it and I think, Jesus, if people have to be told how to collect their poo, there is no hope for humanity.
But the thing is, I genuinely believe that's actually making people more stupid, because the more that you then have to look to other people to get the answers, the more you don't think of the answers yourself. And I'm so happy to be the age that I am and the tail end of the generation that had to look before they crossed the road because there weren't 15 crossings, or we haven't tried to close the road to cars but not do it properly. I'm one of those people that had to remember directions. I had to count my change and say, oh, hang on, this is 50p short. All of those things I thank my bullies. I do. I hated it. I don't want people to be bullied, but it gave me so much.
So, I say this. So I was bullied mercilessly. I went to a very, very big sink school in East London, 1,500 pupils. It was at a time that most people won't remember because I'm so old, where you either did CSEs or GCEs. And the GCE was the O-level. That's what people call O-levels. And there were 10 of us doing O-levels. Everyone else was doing CSEs. And us 10 were bullied mercilessly for being that group of people. The SWATs. And it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I mean, I remember one summer holiday my cousin Jason, we colluded to try and break my leg so I wouldn't have to go back to school. We didn't manage it.
Did you do it on an escalator?
We did it with a big typewriter, but it didn't work. It just hurt. But those bullies made me, you know me now. People are not going to bully me, Christo. I'm not going to stand for it. They made me what I am.
Well, they gave me the ability to talk as well. I mean, I used to humiliate them. I used to talk my way out of getting beaten up, and that became my career. So, God, do I look back on it? Did it traumatize me for years? Did I take a long time to get over it? Yeah, it did. But also, I think with hindsight, I got a resilience that I would never have got otherwise. And I don't think that that I think we're failing a lot of younger people by not building in that resilience that I think gives you the tools. And that brings me to a really interesting story from this week, because I've been dying to ask you about this, and I know your opinion on it already, so I barely even need to finish the sentence. And that is, these breakfast clubs the government are rolling out for schools. And I don't know, like, I think if you are someone that needs to go to work early, then a breakfast club is great. Or if you're going to do it for the whole school, then fine, parents should make a contribution. But the idea that, right, the state, we're going to take it out of your hands to have to feed your child first thing in the morning, I'm not sure that's a good thing.
Well, it's a really bad thing, but there's lots of reasons it's bad, actually. And I've actually done some work on this. And there was a very interesting article in the BMJ about 2 months ago on this. So firstly, for the exact reasons that you say, you have your kids, you should take responsibility for them, and you should feed them in the morning. I have about 40 minutes in the morning to get me ready for work, Alice up and dressed, and breakfast. You know what I do, Christo? I batch cook, because she has rice for breakfast. I batch cook and freeze rice. I take one out, I quickly heat it. She eats that while I'm getting ready. We do it every day. I have to nag her sometimes.
Why does she have rice for breakfast?
That's what she wants.
Oh, all right.
We have no cereal.
No, fine. I think cereal, oats are okay, but I think the cereal in general is the work of the devil, right?
She used to have oats every day, and she started to get a bit feisty over it. And because we never argue over food, I didn't want to have an issue. So I said, okay, what do you want instead? She said rice. That's what she has. Okay. So anyway, so it's doable. Sometimes it takes some planning. Sometimes it's a bit painful. It can be done. Secondly, if you actually look at breakfast clubs, and there are lots of breakfast clubs already around the country, and this was the expose that the BMJ have done, they are being sponsored and money is going into schools by Greggs, Kellogg's, Mars, PepsiCo. I could go on.
Well, actually, I think Kellogg's advertise it. I mean, I love some of Kellogg's cereal, but I can't have it in the house because I will eat the whole lot because it's full of sugar. But other than, I think, just plain cornflakes, they're probably all right as well. But anything else?
No, they're not all right.
They're not.
No, none of it's all right. All of it's loaded with sugar. I had to send an email to the school today because I discovered they were.
But anyway, so just to say, they put it on their boxes. We've sponsored X number of breakfast clubs. But go on, what were you saying?
It's for a reason. They do it because even though the foods that they're giving are on the NHS Good Schools food, I mean, Rice Krispies are on that list, for crying out loud. It's just a bowl of sugar. What they're doing is they're conditioning kids at a very young age with their brand. So they know that when they get to their teenage years, they'll recognise Greggs and Kellogg's and the rest, and then they'll start eating the rest of the crap that they pump out. I have a massive problem with this. If we're going to feed kids at school, could we please just give them some good quality bread as toast? Could we please just give them some porridge, nothing else? But no. Everything has to be infiltrated by big food that are going to line these people up for a lifetime of rubbish food and then obesity.
So we're going to give them rubbish at breakfast. I don't understand. Again, it was probably so my brother got the brunt of it, but I was probably about 9 years old when my dad started his own business, when we started like doing better as a family. But prior to that, we had nothing. But I never ever once went to school without some toast and an egg and some fruit in my belly, and absolutely clean clothes, which were sparkling clean. Never, ever, ever. Never once do I remember doing that. Ever.
I mean, my mum came from a family of 6 in the East End of London. They had newspaper on the floor. They had no central heating. We didn't get central heating until I was 15, actually, because then it was a real luxury. And she says exactly the same. She said they might have only had a bit of bread and dripping for dinner, but they always had food, and they always went to school clean. And if there were holes, they were sewn up and they were neat and tidy. Again, we come back to this external locus of control now, where it is somebody else's job.
Okay, I've got a couple of other questions for you because I haven't done any of them. Okay. I don't know why Sean wants me to ask you about this, but sex lives of the over 50s and the risks of STDs.
It's an interesting one, actually. There have been some reports that now more and more people are getting divorced because divorce is much more acceptable now, and people are dating people over 50. There has been a rise in STDs in people over 50. that has also coincided with sexual health clinics being run into the ground.
And I remember a few years ago there was a story about silver STDs.
Silver STD?
Silver STD, as in pensioners
Yeah.
getting STDs because they're flaunting it around a bit. Okay, what do we both really think of Dr. David Bull?
A situation came where I was getting, as you know, very, very tired of getting up at 4:45 every Saturday and Sunday. So I cut that back to just Saturdays because talk, as you know, were making cost savings, so it was easy for me to do that. And then when the show extended to start at 6:00, I said very clearly to the team, I won't do that.
No, fair enough. But you are still on talk, right?
So Thursday nights with Kevin.
And do you do a medical hour?
Yeah, we do a phone in.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, that's good. So you've got any ailments. I should ask you about my kidney stones.
We've already spoken about your
Yes,
kidney.
my kidneys. I've. If anyone doesn't know, the reason I've been off is because of I have a kidney stone, and it is one of the most. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's one of the most unbearable.
It does make men cry.
I thought I was in childbirth. For 17 hours, I was on all fours. I was huffing and puffing. I was rolling around on the floor, rubbing my belly, rubbing my lower back. It's awful. It's the worst thing in the world. And I'm not just saying
Did I
it.
say to you, I said you needed a certain painkiller up your bottom?
Well, I do. And actually, they gave that to me at the hospital. And she said to me, the nurse said, do you need any lube to put this up your bottom? I said, no, normally it's just a vodka and tonic and a kind word. It's all I need. And yeah, it was, at least she laughed at that. Okay, another one here as well. End of life care for various reasons. And what do you think about the idea of end of life care? And I suppose as well the death bill. The euthanasia bill.
Right. Yeah. So I am vehemently and passionately against this bill. And I've been very outspoken on it. And my reason for that has been very clear. Once you allow the state to kill people, it will expand and expand until in the end we are euthanizing people for mental health distress, financial difficulties. Anybody who says that won't happen really is living in cloud cuckoo land, because even in Oregon, which they quote as the perfect example of where it hasn't happened, it has. More and more people in Oregon are now stating financial difficulties and mental distress for their reason for wanting to die. In Australia now, they are working on dropping lots of the actual safeguards because they see them as a barrier rather than a safeguard.
Okay, so to clarify, if it were to stay where it was with the kinds of people that they are initially talking about, who would you be okay with that? Is it just the fact of what it might morph into that you're worried about?
So, no, because I was going to go on to say, and coercion, and I work in healthcare. I have seen enough elderly people who feel it's their duty to shuffle off this coil, that they've lived long enough, that they feel that they shouldn't go into a home and use up their children's inheritance paying for the home. They feel it's their duty to die. That's wrong and we shouldn't allow it. So I wouldn't accept it in any form.
I'm surprised by that though, because I also think that you're quite a liberal sort of freedom of the individual.
I am.
That's where your ideology is.
If I got run over out here tonight,
what did you say?
If I got run over out here tonight and I was paraplegic, I probably would want the right to die. However, if it meant
I pull the plug for you, babes.
if it meant that one elderly person would die who didn't really want to, that's one elderly person too many. And what we need to do is we need to get our palliative care working, because what people don't realise is in the last weeks or months of life, if you're in agony, if your palliative care was done properly, you could be put into deep sleep sedation. That is completely legal and available.
I agree with palliative care, and that they have been the ones that have got the biggest concerns about this from the point of view that their funding is nowhere near where it should be. But ideologically, I do feel that it's nothing to do with the state if I want to end it all. It's nothing to do with the state.
Why do you need the state to do it for you then?
Because it would be nice if it was done in a way that was, there's little pods that you could go to in like Switzerland or wherever. I quite like the thought of one of those. Like you're in like a Sinclair C5 that's sort of covered up, and you go into a nice forest and look outside, and it all looks lovely. I mean, isn't that all right if it's my decision?
Because
And I'm ill as well, not because I'm feeling a bit low one day. It's because I'm actually terminally ill.
look, in Holland now, they've moved it to the point where people that have ADHD or autism are being allowed to kill themselves. Where does this go? This is state-sanctioned murder. For
Well,
people
it's not murder if the person's consenting to being killed, is it?
I would argue that somebody with mental distress cannot consent to this. They're in deep depression, they have deep troubles, they cannot make this decision.
Well, I agree with that. I do not agree that if you have a mental health problem, that you should be doing this. I absolutely agree with that. But if you have a terminal illness, if at my age I was told you've got an absolutely irreparable terminal illness, it's gonna go badly for you, you are gonna die in the next couple of months, there is a part of me that thinks, well, why shouldn't I be able to go somewhere and do it on my terms?
Because, firstly, doctors can never predict how long somebody is going to live. And I've seen it enough times. Look at Esther Rantzen. She started this campaign 3 years ago when she had 6 months to live. She's still here banging on about it. So she's proven the point, number one. Number two...
And that's a good thing. More power to Esther Rantzen.
Of course, and I'm glad...
Love to have Esther Rantzen around still.
But I've seen enough people dying and facing their mortality. And I promise you, Christo, every single one of them wants another day.
But another day where they're healthy, surely.
Well,
not another day where they're in unspeakable, horrific pain.
But if we did our palliative care properly, that wouldn't happen.
All right, a couple more as well, while I've got you. Last of the boomers said, you'll spend all your time talking to Renee about your ailments. Don't.
Done that already off air.
I've done that already. You have. What else have we got here as well? I will ask actually, just what do you think about the current government? What do you think? How are Labour doing? give them your score sheet. What are they now? 6 months in or so? Give them your score sheet.
I mean, look, we all knew, those of us who didn't vote for them knew it would be bad. I didn't contemplate that it would be this bad. And today I watched PMQs. And you know what? Today, Christo, for the first time, I looked at Starmer and the way he tried to belittle Kemi Badenoch. And I'm no fan of Kemi, by the way. And I looked at him and I thought, you are a horrible man. That's what I felt today.
He doesn't, what is quite staggering about him is the absolute lack of charisma at all. I mean, okay, I get it. I didn't want another politician like Boris Johnson who was oozing so much charisma and had nothing else. But it's amazing that he's got to such dizzy heights of power with less charisma. I mean, Gordon Brown had more charisma. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's actually got none whatsoever. And why isn't Kemi cutting through, in your opinion?
Do you know, I think today he did a pretty good job of showing why, actually, because it doesn't matter what questions she's asking. He's not answering them. That's number one. And he is belittling her. And today he was loving it. He was laughing at her. She actually ended up saying to him today, patronising me is not answering the question. And she was right. And I actually today, I thought it was a really rotten show. And they can't continue like this. They can't continue having PMQs where the Prime Minister never answers one question.
But do you think that the Conservatives, because they had the 14 years and many of the problems that we've got, which I think I actually really like Kemi. I do. I think that maybe she's the right leader at completely the wrong time for the Conservatives. But do you think that legacy of 14 years, whomever they put in, was always going to be the thing that means that they are pretty much toast?
Yeah, I think so. I think nobody's listening. They're just hearing blah, blah, blah. So he can be as appalling as he's being with no pushback at the moment. And in fact, when you look at the House at all, the people asking the questions are the Lee Andersons, the Richard Tice, the Nigel Farages. They've only got 5 MPs.
Do you think that reform is the answer?
Yes, now I do.
God, well, that's it. That's why you've solved it. That's it. The world is put to right. That's it.
Look, do you know what? We need somebody who's going to be a disruptor, don't we? America have now got a disruptor. Lots of people are crying over it, but there's a lot of people here who are saying, thank God.
I mean, Trump gets things done. I mean, it's difficult because I'm not a big fan of Trump. I'm not a big fan of Farage, but I admire their ability to be politicians. I admire their blustering way of sort of getting things done. I admire their grenade throwing that disrupts stuff. And on the subject of Trump, I do think that we're going to end up with peace in Ukraine, which I don't think is a bad thing. I'm not sure I'd have been heaping all that praise on Putin, though I think that the West is not blameless in getting us to this situation at all.
Think about it, Christo. We have poured hundreds of billions of UK taxpayer money into Ukraine for the last 3 years, and nobody in this country or any other European government has ever used the word peace. That word has come about since Trump came to power. Now they're all for, oh yes, we must have a lasting peace, we must have some peacekeepers, we must do this. No one was speaking about peace until Trump was elected.
But the problem is that I don't like Putin. I think Putin is awful. But what irritates me about this is the complete neglect of anyone from the West to say, gosh, I wonder how we got to this situation where Putin felt threatened by NATO expansion. Now, these were sovereign nations that expanded into NATO. They had every right to expand into NATO. But at some point, someone had to say, gosh, I wonder if what effect this is going to have on Putin. The problem is now, and this is why this is 20 years too late, if Putin gets any land, he's got a victory. If he doesn't, it's not going to end. So that's the dilemma that is the West and the world is facing at the moment. Putin is going to end up rewarded for some of his heinous and hideous behaviour though that could have been predicted.
Also, not only could it have been predicted and we provoked him, Kamala Harris standing up saying Ukraine will join NATO was provoking Trump. She had no reason to say it, 5 years ago? But also, he went into Crimea in 2014 and we didn't do anything.
Didn't do anything. And also, Ukraine was a default member of NATO. It wasn't a member of NATO as in an actual formal member of NATO, but you could still go on the NATO website and see everything that they've been doing with Ukraine for the last 10 or 20 years. Now, that does not justify Putin's actions. And of course, again, let's remember that many of the nations around Russia that joined NATO were sovereign nations. They had every right to do so. But at some point, there was going to be a consequence of that without actually trying to either negotiate, speak to, or find out where Putin was. Because we would have done the same. We would have done the same. If China had started a military alliance with Ireland, and Ireland had decided to join China, and Ireland was a sovereign place, we would say to ourselves, well, I don't think I'm very happy about that. That wouldn't excuse us going into Ireland and killing loads of people, but it would give an explanation as to how we got to that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's really sad that we didn't have this conversation about peace
20 years ago, actually.
20 years ago, but 2 years ago, because there would have been a lot of young men in Ukraine and Russia still alive.
Yeah, but then Ukraine had to do something. They couldn't just go, well, all right, then fine. So I think two things can be right at the same time. Putin felt he had to do this and doesn't think he's the bad guy because of the history of the West for the last 20 years, but Ukraine also needed to defend themselves. Both of those things can be correct at the same time.
They didn't defend themselves, did they? Because they probably could have done that for a few months. We just kept giving them enough bombs and enough, tanks and enough, what they called planes.
Yeah, weapons, basically.
Weapons to just keep it going, but they could never have won. So all we did was deplete all of our armoury, cost hundreds of billions of pounds, in order to just prolong the death toll.
It was a proxy war. We were essentially, the West was at war with Russia using Ukraine.
But not enough to win.
It's an absolute mess, and I feel sorry for the Ukrainians. I feel sorry for many of the people in this. And you're right, at least Trump, I mean, the fact he's so unhinged, and he is a bit unhinged, will actually make some of the world leaders go, well, look, maybe we should do something about this. And on that note, We have put the world right. We really have. It's been such a pleasure, Dr. Renee. Where can people find you? So you're on Talk on a Wednesday night. When else are you on TV?
On Talk, and I'm a permanent member of the Saturday 5 Live on GB, which is 6 till 9. I do Britain's Newsroom every other week, Tuesday and Friday, and I believe you're joining me there.
What, on GB News? Well, let's just say I'm going to be appearing every Friday night from this Friday, from 9 o'clock on Patrick's show as well. I'm a permanent member of his new panel as well. So I have finally jumped to the other side, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing some opinions, and also just, you know, trying to give everyone a fair hearing as I do at the moment, and maybe coming to some agreement, maybe not, but we shall see. But it's been lovely to have you. Do like and subscribe to this video. Sorry that it's been a while since we had the last one, but we'll do a few more. You can comment below as well, but like, subscribe, share, subscribe. Did I say subscribe? Subscribe to the channel. Thank you to Renee again, and we'll see you next time for another Putting the World Right.
Right here.